Think about the last time you sat across from a loan officer. You brought your pay stubs. You had your numbers ready. You even practiced the little speech in your head about your raise, your side gigs, your stable job. And then the conversation swerved. They asked about your bank statements, your balances, how much you keep after bills, how long it's been sitting there. Suddenly your income felt loud but not convincing. Like you were trying to prove you're responsible by talking about what you could do, while they were staring at what you already did. And if you didn't have much saved. The tone changed. More questions. More policy. Less flexibility. Higher rate. Smaller approval. That moment feels personal. Like they're judging you. But here's what most people don't realize. They're not judging your lifestyle. They're running a risk test. And one specific number can quietly overpower your paycheck. That moment you just recognized? Here's what was actually happening beneath it. Banks don't just care what you earn. They care what you keep. Your savings rate, how consistently you set money aside relative to your income, is a shortcut for something lenders obsess over: default risk. Default risk is simply the chance you stop paying. Income can be high and still fragile. Overtime gets cut, commissions swing. A great salary can vanish with one layoff. But a pattern of saving tells a different story. You live below your means. You have a buffer. You can absorb surprises without missing payments. And this isn't just vibes. According to the Federal Reserve's 2025 report on the economic well-being of U.S. households, 63% of adults said they could cover a $400 emergency expense using cash, savings, or a credit card paid off at the next statement, meaning 37% couldn't do it that way. So when a lender sees you don't have reserves, they're not thinking, this person is lazy. They're thinking, this person is one car repair away from being late. Here's the twist. Your savings behavior can outweigh your income in the way your file feels to underwriting, the risk engine behind the decision. And it goes deeper than that, because the system doesn't just look at savings. It uses savings as permission to bend other rules. Once you see it, the logic is almost annoying. Savings isn't just money in an account. To a bank, it's proof of behavior. Behavior is predictable, and predictable is safe. A high income can be a fast car. Savings is the seatbelt. The bank would rather lend to the driver who always buckles up than the driver who says, "Don't worry, I'm skilled." And lenders literally measure this seatbelt as reserves. Cash you still have after closing. Fannie Mae, one of the biggest rule setters in mortgages, defines reserves as financial assets measured by how many months of your housing payment, called PIDIA, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and association dues, you could cover if income stopped. For certain deals, they don't just like reserves. They require them. Fannie Mae's selling guide says a second home needs at least 2 months of reserves, and an investment property needs 6 months. So if your total housing payment is $3,000 a month, 6 months of reserves is $18,000 sitting there after you pay your down payment and closing costs. Not invested, not promised, just available. What does this mean for you today? It means, I make good money, is not a complete story. Not to underwriting. If your accounts hover near zero because everything goes to bills, lifestyle, and debt, you can look riskier than someone who earns less but stacks cash consistently. Let me be clear about something. The bank can't read your intentions. It can only read your statements. And once you understand that, the next piece clicks into place. 2 people can apply for the same loan, and the saver can win, even with a smaller paycheck. So picture 2 borrowers walking into the same bank, asking for the same mortgage. Applicant A is the classic, high earner. Take someone like Marcus, good salary, strong career trajectory, but he spends most of what comes in. By the time his bills hit, his accounts don't show much staying power. Applicant B is steadier. Take someone like Danielle, moderate income, but she saves automatically every month and keeps a real cushion. On paper, you'd think Marcus wins. Higher income means more ability to pay, right? Here's what the bank actually sees. What happens when life punches you in the mouth? There's research summarized by the Urban Institute that cites a J.P. Morgan Chase study. Homeowners with less than 1 monthly mortgage payment in reserve had a 2.45% default likelihood, while borrowers with 4 mortgage payments in reserve had a 0.36% default likelihood. That's not a small difference. That's the bank's nightmare versus the bank's favorite customer. So when underwriting looks at Marcus, they might think, if his income hiccups, there's no runway. With Danielle, they think, even if something goes wrong, she can float payments while she fixes it. What does that mean for you? If you're trying to qualify or you're trying to negotiate, you can't only optimize income. You have to optimize how your file reads, stability, runway, discipline, because the person with a cushion gets options. The person without one gets rules. And now comes the part that's uncomfortable. Once you know savings creates options, you can use it as leverage, not just for approval, but for better terms. You now know what the bank is really testing. Next, you'll see how to turn your savings into bargaining power, so the rate, the fees, and the policy suddenly get a lot more flexible. Because once the bank clocks you as low risk, the conversation stops being a test and starts being a deal. Savings is leverage because it changes your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Translation: you can walk, you can delay, you can bring a bigger down payment, you can cover reserves without sweating. And when you have options, policy turns into, let me see what I can do. There's a clean proof that negotiation matters in lending. A June 2024 Philadelphia Fed working paper using the National Survey of Mortgage Originations found that borrowers who applied to 2 or more lenders in search of better terms got, on average, a 0.075 percentage point lower rate, about 7.5 basis points, compared with similar borrowers who didn't. Buta, Fuster, Hismo, WP 24-11. That's not magic. That's the price of competition. Now combine that with how your file reads when you have real cash reserves. You're not begging for approval. You're interviewing lenders, and lenders feel that. A borrower with a thin cushion is trapped. You can't risk delays, can't absorb surprise fees, can't pivot if the appraisal comes in low. So the bank knows you'll accept the script. But if you've got runway, you can ask for lender credits to offset closing costs. You can push back on junk fees. You can say, match this loan estimate. You can even choose a slightly higher rate in exchange for a credit if it protects your cash. That's the hidden system advantage. Savings doesn't just protect you from emergencies. It buys you time, choices, and the ability to make lenders compete for you. So what do you actually do with all of this? Starting this month, so your savings shows up as power on paper, here's exactly what to do. Step 1. Create underwriting visible savings. Not random leftovers. Set an automatic transfer the day after payday into a separate savings account. Keep it boring. Consistency is the whole point. Step 2. Build reserves in months, not dollars. Take your monthly housing payment, or the one you're targeting, and aim for 1 month first, then 3, then 6. Banks think in, how many payments could you make if life hits? So you should too. Step 3. Stop sabotaging your statements. For 60 to 90 days before any big application, keep your balances stable. Don't do huge unexplained cash deposits. Don't drain accounts for a temporary purchase. Underwriting reads patterns, not promises. Step 4. Turn savings into negotiation ammo. Get 2 loan estimates. Minimum. When you have them, you're not asking, you're comparing. Use the CFPB's loan estimate comparison checklist, rate, origination charges, and lender credits, and make them compete line by line. Step 5. Ask for one specific improvement. A credit toward closing costs. A lower origination fee. A rate match. One clean request beats 10 vague ones. If this was useful, you'll want the next video on the exact numbers lenders love. How much cash to keep, where to keep it, and what counts as reserves, without killing your investing plan. Subscribe if you want more of the stuff the system expects you to know, but never explains.